We read the Shabbat Parshat Miketz, and of course, Parshat Miketz has the story of Paro's dreams, the dreams that Paro has, where he is, of course, on the he's he sees the seven skinny cows, seven fat cows, right? What are the skinny cows? Mess with the fat cow. What are they? The fat cows eat the skinny cows. Sorry, the skinny cows eat the fat cows, etc., etc. But I want to start this week by talking about one specific word that's used early on in this Torah reading, and it's a word that's important to us when we're talking about the generally the ideas within the end of Sefer, the end of Sefer Bereshit, and really early on in Sefer Shmot, and it comes from the speech that the Sar Hamashkim makes, right? So if Paro tells about his dreams, and then the Sar Hamashkim says to Paro, "Et chatai ani maskir hayom," I must make mention of my offenses on this day. When he says his chataim, his sins, this is the cupbearer. When he says the sins, is it the sins that put him in prison, or is it the sins that, as a result of them, he did not remember Paro? And he tells the story. I was there, and the baker were there, and we had dreams each one night. And in verse 12 in Pasuk Yud Bet, this is Mem Aleph Yud Bet, he says, "V'shami tanu na'ar ivri eved lasar hatabachim." And there with us was I'm looking at my English, a servant of the prefect. And we told him our dreams. He interpreted them for us, telling each of them the meaning of his dream. Okay? And he says he's a Hebrew youth is the way that this word is used. Okay, the word Ivri, we know the word Ivri. The Ivri is an important word. We talk about Avram being an Ivri, Avram being a Hebrew. Here, Yosef is identified as being a Na'ar Ivri. Later on, we'll have, the Ivrim. And we'll have it multiple times towards the end of the book of Bereshit and early on in the book of Shmot. Now, what does the word mean? Firstly, what does the word mean? La'avor, avar, means to pass, right? In the Hebrew, if you know Hebrew grammar, we have avar, hoveh, and atid. Atid is the future tense. Hoveh is the present tense. Avar is the past tense because it is something that passes. Avram is called an Ivri because he passes. He migrates from his country, home country, Mesopotamia, Syria, whatever you want to call it, or Kasdim, to Israel. He is Ivri. He is somebody who is what we would call perhaps today a migrant, an immigrant, a migrant, a wanderer, a refugee, whatever term you want to use within that context. I'm not sure which one is right or wrong, but it means somebody who's not part of the larger population, somebody who is a minority, and somebody who specifically is not from here and probably has migrated from another place, a passer, somebody who has passed from somebody else, from somewhere else. That's why Yosef is also called Na'ar Ivri, as you want, as such. He is an Ivri. He's somebody who has come from another place. He's not originally Egyptian. He was not born as a slave in an Egyptian family to Egyptian slaves. He was from somewhere else. He was brought down to Egypt, and he was sold in the slave market. So an Ivri means somebody who is a migrant, somebody who comes from one place to another. And now think about what's being said here. Let's look back, right? So the Sar Hamashkim, the cupbearer, is saying, I made a mistake. I was in prison, and in the prison with us, Vishami Tanu Na'ar Ivri. And in prison with us was this migrant, this Na'ar Ivri, this migrant boy. And it's like any other time you want to say anything about somebody. You want to describe them. Do you have to describe them based upon their race? Do you have to describe them based upon, right? He's not telling Paro, we're not sure who this person is, so I'm painting a portrait of him so we know who to look for. He knows who exactly the person is. He knows exactly where the person is found. The Sar Hamashkim adds this idea into the story. It's not just any person. It was a Nar Ivri. It was a migrant. And in fact, it's one of many times here, as I said earlier, where we have this Ivri, this image of the Ivri used in terms of Yosef and others. When Yosef, back in Perek is it Lamed Tet? Believe it's Parak Lamed Tet. We have this woman, the wife of Potiphar, wants to sleep with Yosef, and in Parak Lamed Tet, Pasuk Yudalid. What happens? Vatikrala anshe veita. She calls all the people from her house. Vatomer lahem, and she says to them, "Lay more as follows." This is what she says: Re'u hevi lanu ish ivri litzachik banu. Look, he brought us a Hebrew to play with us. Ba Elai l'shakevi mi v'ekraba kol gadol. He tried to sleep with me, and I screamed out loud. Right? You could read that pasuk, and she could have just said, "Ri hevi lanu ish litzachek banu." A man was brought to play with us, and he tried to sleep with me. Again, there, the word ivri is an unnecessary word. And what I could get out of these two phrases, and what I could get out of these two terms, is the idea that when in Egypt, in Ivri, to be a migrant, to be a passerby, to be a wanderer, to be a non-citizen was a negative thing. And it is mentioned here in these cases in the pejorative. It's negative, it's bad, right? It's the same thing like you say, that Jew stole from me. Well, he stole from you because he's a bad guy. It's nothing to do with him being a Jew. Whatever word you want to use to describe whatever race, whatever people, that migrant stole from me. He stole from you because he's a thief. It's nothing to do with being a migrant. He wants to rape you, not because he's an Ivri, not because he's a migrant, not because he's from somewhere else, because he's a bad person. Now, of course, that's a mischaracterization by the wife of Potiphar, but that's a separate issue. And here too, the Sar HaMashkim, in what he says to Paro, is describing Yosef in a way that's very, very negative. It's despite the fact that he is a Na'ar Ivri, and the real way that I like to describe those words is a Jew boy. It's like, if we would put it in today's terms, it's an insult of who he is and how we looked at him. He's a nothing. He's a Jew boy. And in fact, if we go on later, what's going to happen later on? The brothers are going to come down, and they come down, and Yosef invites them to eat with him. And we're told later on that when the brothers come, and this later on Parshat Miketz, when they eat, what does it say? Yosef sat at a table by himself because he was the royalty. The Egyptians who were with him sat at a table, and the brothers sat in another table. And you'll see this later on in this week's parsha. What does it say? Why did the Egyptians not sit with the Hebrew? Because it would be a toeva. It would be an abomination for the Egyptians to eat together with the migrants, together with the Hebrews. The Egyptians, what do they? They don't eat together with the Hebrews. What does it sound like? Sounds like Alabama in 1950, sounds like Mississippi, sounds like Jim Crow laws. There is a terrible amount of hatred of, you want to call it minorities, you want to call it migrants, you want to call it Jews. I don't know which word to use as the proper way to express exactly what the hatred was, but there is one class, which is the Egyptians, and there is this other class, which is people from other places. And the people from other places, specifically the Ivrim, the migrants, the people from other places, are lesser. They don't drink from the same water fountain. They don't sit in the same place on the bus. They are seen as lesser. They can eat, but they will not eat at the same table as the Jews. And that's what this word appears. And it's an important point to point out in two things. Number one, later on, when we get to the book of Shmot, and all of a sudden, Paro says, we have this Hinei Am, right? We have this nation amongst us. Am, right? Bnei Yisrael, Rava Atzum Mimenu is greater for us, and they might join an attacking enemy, and they might destroy us. They're a third rail. They're not part of our society. Well, you know what? You can't just say that on day one. Right? The Holocaust doesn't just start in 1939. It's after years of propaganda and hatred. The same thing happened in Egypt. We have this conception in Egypt already that there's something wrong with foreigners. The foreigners are lesser. I want to describe the person who tried to rape me. He's not a person. He's a Hebrew person. He's a migrant person. Oh, we were in jail and things were terrible. But there was this Jew boy. There was this migrant. And even though he's from this lower class and a little nothing, he was able, and he should stand in front of you, Paro. Now, to Paro's credit, what Paro does here, Paro does not care about Yosef's background. Right? When Yosef comes and he interprets the dreams and he tells Paro what it is that Paro should do, the amazing thing that Paro does, one of the amazing things that Paro does is he says, "I don't care who you are. I don't care." Right? Acharei odia Elohim otcha. This is in 41:39 Mem Aleph Lametet. At Kolzot, once you have revealed all these things to us, the meaning of the dream, you've given me an idea of what I should do. Ein navon v'chachom kamocha. There's nobody like you. Atati el beiti. You're going to be in charge of my house. V'alpicha yishak kalami rak hakisei egdal mimeka. The only thing is that my throne is going to be greater than yours. You're going to be in charge of everything. I'm going to go off to the sauna. I'm going to have a massage. I'm going to have I'm going to go play some tennis and whatever it was that I do in retirement, and I know I have the smartest guy in charge. You're in charge of everything. Paro doesn't care. He looks at Yosef, Rei natati otcha kol eretz Mitzrayim. You're in charge of Egypt. I don't care who you are. I don't care your background. I don't care where you come from. You're the best man for the job. So Paro, to a certain extent, what Paro is able to do is Paro is able to look beyond the way that Yosef is described as being the Nar Ivri, the Jew boy. Maybe Paro was asked about the past and was told about this incident of the wife of Potiphar, this Jew boy, this Jew man, this migrant tried to rape me. But what Paro doesn't do is he doesn't stem and destroy the anti-Semitism. It may, and I know I'm using the term anti-Semitism, which is sort of a misnomer, but this hatred of foreigners, it's still there underneath. It's still there when Yosef sits the Egyptians at one table and the Ivrim, the Hebrew, at the other table. And so if we want to start to look at some of, if you want to call it anti-Semitism, you want to call it the hatred of foreigners, the hatred of migrants, if you want to start to think about how does a society get to throwing babies in the Nile River? How does a society get to where there's one class who are made into slaves to do backbreaking labor and become a horrendous society, a society that needs to be struck down, a society that needs to be destroyed, a society that God needs to intervene to take a people out of another people? It starts with this. It starts with this hatred of one class to another. And I think it's identified therein. Paro, on the other hand, we could see, best man for the job. However, there's something insidious about what Paro does as well, and we'll continue with that. We'll talk about that. While Paro does elevate Yosef, what does he do to Yosef when he elevates him to glory? We'll talk about that as we continue with our study of Parshat Miketz come tomorrow.